Basically should never have walked out of this car accident. They're being held back by emergency services. They think I'm dead. Finish school, get into university. At this point, I had no real clarity around what I wanted to do. I actually think I should have gone into a commerce or business degree. Probably one of my biggest mentors was my uncle, who was a doctor. You know, he had a really successful career, really successful marriage, very happy, comfortable life, traveled the world a lot. You know, saw him as a big role model, and so healthcare appealed to me because of what he did. At the time, you know, the interest was around physiotherapy. I remember my careers counsellor was saying there's this kind of up and coming profession called osteopathy. I didn't know much about it. My uncle actually had an osteopath that worked for him at his medical clinic. Spoke to her over the phone. Sounded like a great job. So I went into it, and I absolutely hated it. It was the worst decision ever. It took me like maybe 2 or 3 months to work out this was not for me, but also I wasn't one to just quit. What I decided was I'm going to get really high grades in my 3-year undergrad, and then we go do something else. And I think the thought process was that I'd try and go be a doctor. Essentially spent that whole first year, the first 9 months of university in the library, studying very hard, attending every class. I was very, very diligent. There was the opportunity to chase girls and be very distracted and all that. I was very laser focused. I think I decided that I hate this. I should do something else, and I've got to do something about it. So I've got to make up somehow, and that was to get a really high GPA in my undergraduate. I did that. Consistently worked really hard to make some money, studied really hard, went to all my classes, and the biggest issue was that I had this kind of lack of risk aversion. You know, being a 19-year-old, testosterone-driven, competitive guy, I was crazy the way I drove, the way I, you know, took risks and these sort of things, and used to speed a lot in the car. And then one day, sunny afternoon, 2nd of September 2006, I'm driving to the shops with a friend of mine. He's in his car and I'm in my car. We'd just been to our local church, finished there, was hungry, decided we'd go have some lunch, driving like an idiot, and I wrapped my car around a pole. Basically should never have walked out of this car accident. Either the ambos or the police officer had basically said to me later on that we arrived basically thinking that someone was dead in the car. But here I was, alive. I think I was concussed in the car. I guess the real miracle of it was that the pole had impacted my driver door. It really should have crushed my whole body, but my seat had lifted off and was kind of sitting in the back seat or even towards the boot. The pole had basically crushed my leg. I'd hit my head, bleeding out of my ears and nose. They were worried about swelling around my brain. Anyways, they cut me out to get me stable, put me in an ambulance and rushed me to emergency. My friend had, because he was driving close by, he'd pulled over and actually called the police and ambulance and emergency services, but he'd also called my family.
Hello, you need to come here quick. David,
Everyone basically rushed to the scene. I was still being cut out. They arrived like in sheer shock. The reason that no one had called my parents by this point is because this was the first time in probably 15 years they'd decided to go away for their anniversary. They'd driven quite a distance out, and so no one called them because, you know, they wouldn't have been able to get there quickly. But essentially, my family are running at this scene. They're being held back by emergency services. They think I'm dead, and then basically the police and ambulance are saying he's not dead, but he's in a really bad condition. I actually remember the overtaking turn, and then the memory cuts. So I blacked out from that point on. Just remember waking up, you know, dazed in a hospital. My understanding that was like 3 days later, basically. the first thing they're most worried about is my brain, and if I've suffered brain damage. So they're monitoring that really carefully, all the while sort of neglecting my leg. They basically had identified that I broke my femur, which is your big thigh bone. So big fracture to that, strongest bone in your body, very hard to break. But they said it was sort of stable and would be kind of a secondary thing that they would address. But the main thing was my head and brain. Swelling around my brain stabilized. I started to become conscious again. They were lining me up to have surgery on my leg. Every time I was scheduled for an operation, I kept getting bumped down in priority, and basically other major incidences or accidents kept getting prioritized over me. And they left my leg like that overnight, scheduled me for a surgery the next morning, at which point they'd found that the fracture had actually